Question, sir.
All right, so first of all, I want to say that thank you so much for coming. I really, really love that presentation and everything you said in it. Just a question about NGOs qualifying for dollar-for-dollar reductions. Mm-hmm. Would it be the government that decides like which NGOs should be able to qualify for it, or because I can kind of see that being like powerful NGOs might want to block smaller ones from qualifying for the benefit? It's just like a small question, but I love everything you said.
No, and that's absolutely a great question. Essentially, if government is deciding which NGOs you can donate to, doesn't that give the government a whole lot of power? Well, the government has that power currently, so I would couch it in that. Understand that that's where we're at. And I think that it takes time to move to a voluntary tax system. This is not going to happen overnight, and nor would I want it to. Because what would happen if the government stopped having any money overnight? Talk to the people who receive government services right now who rely on those. Talk to the people who received government services during the shutdown, and the shutdown happened, and they were no longer receiving those services. Have empathy for the people who their lives unfortunately depend on that government spending that we're trying to change. And so you have to understand that while government creates victims on the spending end with those people by not taking care of enough people, you can't just cut it out tomorrow. So yes, for right now, government agencies would probably regulate this process as we work our way toward a voluntary tax system. But as we transition, instead of going from, I'm just going to cut a tax and screw you, we say, no, this entity's doing better. You can now send your dollars there. And when they're sending half or 3/4 of their tax dollars to that entity, you look at the government and go, so why do we need to pay you to administrate this anyway? They're doing a better job. Make sense? Yeah, you right there. Yep.
Oh, great. So first, let me say thank you for your presentation and kudos to you on believing so strongly in the idea that you're willing to get out and fight for it. I think that's very admirable. I'm curious to know how you would respond to someone, an interlocutor of yours who disagreed with you and raised the following concern around co-ops in general and Christian co-ops in particular in the case of healthcare. This is a quote from the Atlantic article that was written. Quote, Christian health ministries aren't for everyone. Members have to follow biblical principles of behavior, including abstaining from drugs or tobacco products, staying away from alcohol abuse, and keeping sex within the confines of marriage. They must, not can, must make a profession of their faith and attend the church regularly. In the cases of a family, if a teenager were to become pregnant or get a sexually transmitted infection, the associated medical costs would not be shared, whereas in the current system under Obamacare, they would. So if a cost-sharing organization, particularly one that's Christian, can essentially embed in itself some of these discriminatory measures, some might say discerning measures, I would say discriminatory measures, in ways that the government can't because of the guarantee of equal protection under the law. What makes your vision more appealing than this other one on this specific question of the ability to discern and or discriminate amongst the people who are in very need of the services we're looking to provide?
That's a really good question. And it actually points out a really important point I want you guys all to get. This is not about those other services. This is about the choice. This is about, those services are an example. And here's why the nonprofits do that. Because under Obamacare, every nonprofit healthcare sharing ministry, co-op, that doesn't do that, they're outlawed. They exist under a special provision of Obamacare under the religious freedom provisions of our Constitution. That's the only way they can possibly exist, is if they have those strict rules in place. Christian Healthcare Ministries alone has fought off at least 10 or 15 state attorney generals that tried to shut it down. This is what happened to co-ops back after the Great Depression. Co-ops took care of a large majority of the African American community. Civil Rights Act, a few other things that prohibited discrimination based on race. They were all based around race because the white co-ops wouldn't let them in. They outlawed those versions of the co-ops that actually helped people. I'm not advocating for any one of those organizations, nor am I endorsing them. I'm pointing them out as an example. And I'm asking you guys to look in your community and find examples. That, unfortunately, only helps a small portion of people. But if we can expand that provision there, and we can allow more of these things to exist that don't require you to, if you get a teen pregnancy, you can't possibly be involved. If we can expand that provision so it covers more people, that's creating more choice in where our tax dollars go. and it moves us toward a more voluntary tax system. So I totally understand your concern, and I want you or someone else to be able to address that. Under current law, you can't.
Yeah, so probably the most common criticism you're going to get with the voluntary tax system is going to be, if it's voluntary, then, people aren't going to, pay it. They're going to have to, voluntarily give their money. Leftists, and even people on the right would say, it's voluntary, they would never give it at all. People are inherently selfish. So what would be like the best quick argument to address that?
Yeah, there's two answers to that. Number one, we have voluntary contribution forms on top of people's taxes. They already give millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars in the states. You already see it in play. Number two, again, it's a transition period. You work your way toward that. Tomorrow, I'm not going to say, push for voluntary contributions, make your whole state government voluntary. I'm not going to say that because you have to give those organizations and those companies the chance to actually compete by being able to direct some of your tax dollars to them. And so my answer is, we're not reducing the amount of tax dollars you pay right away. We're working our way toward that. But even if we did, we think there's ample evidence that shows that most people would actually take care of society.
So in the short-term version, would a voluntary system be like a checkbox that says, I want to fund the EPA, I want to fund NASA, I don't want to fund the DOD, something like that?
I think it's more likely to start at your city and at your state level, but I think it's that's why I start with the checkboxes. I think you're going to get the least resistance starting with the checkboxes and saying, look, the government's still going to get it all, but you're going to get to choose where it goes. But wherever in your community, this is designed to solve the problems of your city, your state, and the problems in our nation. So whatever is the best way to solve those problems, that's the way we implement it. But as a practical matter, I probably would start with the checkboxes.
Explain more about the Japanese voluntary tax system example.
Sure. So just to be clear, it is moving toward voluntary taxation. I realize they're not actually letting you keep more of your money. But the Japanese system is basically, you can choose which government your money goes to. You can earmark it and say it has to go to this specific project. Local, regional government, federal government, basically any government program that they actually have a crowdfunding website where all the governments have their programs listed and they all compete with each other. And you can choose which one you want to fund with your tax dollars. And the way it works is you just tell the federal Japanese government, here's my receipt from the local government. I gave my tax dollars to them, 45% of my tax dollars to them instead. Thanks, guys. Have a nice day. You. Yes.
Hi, Dan. Good to see you.
Good to see you again.
Look at my point. I need to say that every nonprofit organization, arguably they do a very good job. Every one of them is the creation of the IRS. Now, when I tried to open a bank account for my group, the Brooklyn Libertarian Party, I had to register as a nonprofit. Now, it's certainly different than what you mentioned, and definitely different than the Clinton Foundation, which is a nonprofit, by the way. But nonprofit is the creation of IRS. Okay, now my next point, you mentioned about compliance costs, enforcement and all that, which adds to the cost of collecting tax. The collection of the tax, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a guy who wrote a book called Cost of Returns. He tallied all the costs, every cost that's involved with this, besides compliance. Things like people wasting their time and energy and seeking tax havens, tax shelters, the underground economy to avoid tax, extremely efficient. They're wasting a lot of money trying to avoid tax. And this man, he found out that for every dollar you pay in taxes, you got to pay an extra, at that time, 65 cents. So this was like 25 years ago, probably now it's like $1. My point is, this extra cost must be figured into it. Let's say the ethanol farmers get $1 billion subsidy. You got to remember, 65 cents, $650 million in added in a service charge. Now, reverse this with our debt, $1 trillion in debt. How much would it cost to collect the taxes to pay it down? That's the extra service charge for that.
So to address both of your points there, starting with the IRS. Our organization was started with the mission to hold the IRS accountable and replace the tax code. That's where we started as an organization, and we ended up at voluntary taxation. Why did we end up at voluntary taxation? Why is the IRS so brutal? The IRS, there was about 100 hearings in Congress after the IRS scandal where they targeted nonprofit groups like yours, like you're talking about. There's about 100 hearings. So has anything changed at the IRS? They're all of a sudden, nice to you and they gave all their nonprofit statuses back? No, there's still applications waiting. And the IRS chief flat out told Congress, I have it in a slide in a longer presentation. Yeah, there's a longer one. The IRS chief flat out told Congress, well, you can't abolish us, but you could change the name if it makes you feel better. The reason why the IRS is so abusive is you can't go anywhere else. You can't direct your money anywhere else. You can't have a direct impact on that agency. You can't fire a federal employee from that agency. You have any idea how hard it is to fire a federal employee, much less an IRS employee? If you had the ability to go, where all the Tea Parties were targeted, guess what? We're taking the 50% federal tax credit. We're telling the federal government, this is how much money you just lost by doing that to us, and we're sending it all over here instead. The IRS would have to respond because you start to hold them accountable as an agency. Congress will not. Congress will not change the purse strings. They will not reduce the IRS's budget that much. They will not hold the IRS accountable. So that's one part of your question. The other thing, I just stuck with the numbers that we could most easily prove. I know if you calculate the cost, it goes even further. But the costs there are actually from the Mercatus Center, tied with a report that we did on the Office of Management and Budget. So we kept with the most official numbers we could possibly work with. I know there's probably more costs that continue to increase as we go along.
Under this check system, which, as I would agree, is not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction, would it be based on percentages? For example, if you check one box, 100% of your money goes. If you check two boxes, 50% would go to each. Or would you be able to, for some reason, somehow delegate what percentage goes to which charities or which funds?
We are endorsing a direction, not a destination. However you feel it should be done in your state, in your community, in your country, as long as the direction is moving toward voluntary taxation. You could do percentages. I personally like the dollar for dollar thing because then it doesn't cost you anything to give to a charity or to keep government accountable. It's not a cost on you and a cost on your fellow taxpayers. But there's all kinds of options you can choose, whichever one you like. It is about the ideas, getting these ideas out there into the public space and into this conference and into your campuses. If the idea spreads and it spreads like wildfire, like we think it can, that's what matters.
Hey, I want to ask a little bit about, in reference to the Japanese sort of competitive community taxation system. Some people write in names like Harambe on elections, okay? There's a knowledge problem here I can see, and I want to ask if you've thought about this, where the average citizen who pays taxes is rationally ignorant about most of what happens in government and doesn't necessarily know how to allocate the tax dollars. It could be worse than government bureaucrats doing it, possibly, in terms of who needs what.
That's an interesting question, and it's one that...
It also exposes that marketing becomes a factor.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All the forces of the market become a factor. I tend to firmly believe that you can run your life better than a government bureaucrat. And this would be the ultimate test of that if you gave people the ability to check off those check boxes instead of a bureaucrat or a politician. But further to your point about the lack of education, most people enter activism and they think they need to educate. That is their number one goal: educate people, educate people, educate people. Well, realistically, action, you have to take action more than education a lot in activism to get anything done. Action may create that education, but you have to take that action. Why? Because quite literally, the legislative system's rigged against you. I mean, I'm not sure if you guys know, but a committee chair can kill your bill. It doesn't matter who you elected to that committee. The committee chair by themselves can kill your bill. The Speaker of the House can kill your bill in the legislature if you want to change something in law. We have, I will use the term somewhat lightly, a virtual dictatorship throughout the legislative branch, not just the executive branch. What this would do, all you'd have to do is educate people. All you'd have to do is say, there's now a checkbox that allows you to give all your money to NASA instead of anybody else in the government. You can check that checkbox. And all they have to do is check on a form. They don't have to go to a poll. They don't have to take a day off of work. They don't have to do anything like that. So all you need to do now, when this is implemented in your communities, is educate people.
So I'm assuming you're describing this new legislation, obviously become law, which forces the government to implement this choosing where you get to taxes. How are you advocating for how to facilitate that you have the process? congressional term limits, Congress is not going to vote on congressional term limits. So what are your realistic restrictions for that?
So with $0 and a bunch of spunky volunteers, my organization, People Against the NDAA, passed legislation in the capital of New York, several other cities and counties, and at the state legislature. You really only need 3% of people. If you guys want to learn a little bit more about engaging, you go to FACL training. That's FACL training. If Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership training, they do an awesome training on how you only need 3% of the population to get this done. But you're right, we are talking legislation, and that's why we're starting on a state and local level. That's why we're starting where if there's 600 people, you only need 18. That's why we're starting on that level instead of in Congress, and you show that the idea works, and you work your way up. What is one of the reasons why tax reform, as we know about it, flat tax, fair tax, these other things like that, why is that not working? Because you're asking people to go from a constant to an idea. There's no pilot program. There's no, okay, this actually exists somewhere and here's how it works. The flat tax isn't really anywhere in the US. They're asking them to go from, oh, wow, here's my wallet. I'm just going to throw it up to this crazy idea. It really doesn't work out. So you have to go on a state and local level if you want to implement this. You could even start at your campus level with the ideas and getting the ideas out there. You know, there's actually probably a process. I didn't think about this, but there's probably a process by which you could get some sort of checkoff system on your campus to choose how to spend some of the college funds. That would be an interesting thing to look into. Maybe not pay the administrators quite as much. They might not like that, but that is a low level where you can start to get going.
I was wondering if I could get your views on alternatives, for-profit alternatives like entrepreneurs, in providing healthcare.
I don't favor for-profits, nonprofits, co-ops. I favor what works. So if you can prove that it works and you can show that it works, this is why we want alternatives from you guys. Prove it works, show it works, and we're in favor of people having the choice to pick that.
With the idea of it being a movement to get the ideas first and then to go and get this done. Once, say I go back to Connecticut and I get 300 people that are wanting to get this started, what then would be the next step? If, like you said, the legislative body can kill it at any time.
We have myself, Jason Casella, Jeff Lewis, and several other people who've passed legislation all across the country. We've written it, we've passed it, we've critiqued it, we've told legislators they don't know the Constitution, much less the English language. We would be more than happy to help you out if you went to taxrevolution.us, contacted us at any stage. We'd be happy to help you out. I just want you to understand you've got to focus on the ideas first, and then when you have the ideas, then you can engage people and start getting them to take action. 2 more questions. Good. Yep.
So I have a follow-up to the earlier question that I had. So when I asked you about Christian health ministry, you said that you weren't endorsing the choice of Christian health ministries per se, but rather supporting the ability of increased choice, because I imagine that correlates in your mind, in your argument, to increased freedom. Is that right?
No, better outcomes. It's not about increased freedom, it's better outcomes.
Better outcomes.
Yep.
Even then. So why then would I, if I'm skeptical of the position that you have, move from the status quo in which I'm guaranteed at least the existence of an option that meets my need because of sort of this federal regulation or state regulation, versus a world in which there might be an option that exists for me. I don't know. And insofar as there might be an option that exists, it might be in my state, it might be in 3 states over, it might be in 20 states over. Why would I trade the guarantee that I currently get in the status quo, which if I personally am satisfied with the outcomes, versus this new world that might exist that you're advocating for, in which if the option does exist, there could be someone who enters the market and provides that service, but there also might not be.
We don't want to operate off the principle of could be. We are what's called a first do no harm organization. And what that means is we want to make sure that people are helped by other organizations in the community before we support any type. Now, I would probably support choice inside the government or things like that. But before we would support, oh yeah, you can take your tax dollars completely out of the government, as an organization, it may work different in your communities. But as an organization, before we would support that, we would look at, we're developing an efficiency model for nonprofits. So we would look at the area and make sure that those needs can more or less be taken care of, or it's just tax dollars being wasted or whatever. We have to operate as libertarians and as conservatives, Republicans, liberals, whatever your political persuasion is, You cannot say my ideology is more important than your life or your needs or your humanity. You have to operate on an empirical basis, and that is how the best ideology wins. So if all this results in, if all this tax revolution results in, is government is more efficient, helps more people, counts and tracks the people they actually help, and more people are engaged and more people are involved, more people will be able to hold their government accountable officially, if that's all that this results in, then I'll consider the voluntary tax revolution a success, because we will have shown that the government helps people more than any other way. I don't think that's going to be the case. But if they did, if that is the case, if the data shows the government helps people any other way, I don't think any self-respecting libertarian or free marketeer would want to say, yeah, I actually want a society that makes people worse off. Unfortunately, she's flashing. I'll get you. She's flashing the stop sign at me. You guys have been an amazing audience. Thank you guys so much. Get a chance, go to taxrevolution.us, join the revolution, pick up some cards up here to hand out to your friends. Thank you guys.